A specter is haunting the world, the specter of extinction. 99% of all species that have ever lived no longer exist. If not for all this death, life on Earth as we know it couldn't have developed. If not for past mass extinction events, none of us would have been here today. By collapsing entire ecosystems or by allowing new species to thrive, or both, extinction shapes the life that comes in its wake. Extinction is hauntological, even if no longer present, and extinction is literally marked by absence, it still has an effect. It still haunts us. Coined by philosopher Jacques Derrida, hauntology is about how what is no longer or not yet here impacts and shapes the present. The term is a play on the word ontology. Indeed, in the original French, the two terms are almost identical. While ontology is the study of being in a positive sense of what being is and what it consists of, hauntology is about how being is impacted by what it is not, by what isn't there, how what isn't there constitutes what is there, how absences shape presences, or rather how absences make themselves present, how what isn't there makes itself felt. Like a specter. Like something from a different time that is there, yet not quite. Like something floating between life and death, between presence and absence, between being and non-being. Hauntology is a study of ambiguity, of the liminal and abject. That in-betweenness, that indeterminacy, that is what's so haunting. This might sound nonsensical and even contradictory. What is what is, you might say tautologically, and what is cannot be what it is not. But consider this. Think of how the negative space around the subject in an image forms the subject. Something that isn't the subject helps create the subject. Think of how words refer to things but aren't the things themselves. This is not a pipe, said Rene, but the word pipe is not a pipe either. The word pipe talks about something that is not itself. Think of how a traumatic event, even though it's in the past and no longer here, can still feel frighteningly present. A certain sound, sight, smell, sensation, subject matter that is reminiscent of the event but is not the event itself can trigger trauma. Trauma is like being haunted by the past. Which brings me to what to even call it. Global heating, climate change, climate crisis, the apocalypse, the eco-crisis. Many have pointed out the difficulty of thinking about this crisis. The human brain doesn't seem equipped to understand it or care. This crisis is so big, so stretched out in time, so jolted out of time, so ever-present yet invisible that I think it makes sense to talk about it in spectral terms. To talk about ghosts. Like the ghostly life of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are life, millions of years old life, likely from extinct life forms, turned into either a solid, liquid, or gaseous form through slow geological processes. Burning these fuels release carbon, the building blocks of life. We are carbon-based life forms after all. Yet these components of life, when released in enormous quantities into the atmosphere, bring about death and extinction through droughts, fires, and heat waves. Millions of years old life is killing life today. The past haunts us. Yet most of these fuels lay dormant until the satanic mills of the Industrial Revolution. More than 2 centuries have passed since then, but because carbon lingers long in the atmosphere, the carbon from those satanic mills is still up there. The emissions of the past are still heating the earth, still changing the climate, still shaping our lives, still haunting us. We are also haunted by the social and economic relations those times helped cement into place. The relations between worker and capitalist, between colonized and colonizer, between imperialized and imperialist, between exploited and exploiter. Workers are still suffering the world over despite promises of progress. The global south is still locked into a subservient role by the global north, despite the long arc of history supposedly bending towards justice. These relations are inherent in every commodity. If you let yourself become aware of the conditions in the mines and the sweatshops and the factories that bring about all the world's commodities, those commodities take on an off-putting aura of casual cruelty. Not unlike how a vegan is reminded of the suffering in factory farming every time they see animal products. We are haunted by the banality of evil. In this world, justice doesn't matter, only profits. Nothing personal, just business. The ghostly form of business that compels people to the gravest evil and the deepest indignity. No one, not even the most privileged, is truly in control. Even the apologists of capitalism talk about the market being governed by an invisible hand. A ghostly image if I ever heard one. They don't really understand what's going on. According to their theories, where markets reach perfect equilibrium unless tampered with, financial crashes like those that happened in 2008 shouldn't happen. The odds are 1 in several billion. Why, if the system is all about spontaneous order and equilibrium, the perfect match between supply and demand, perfect flows of information where the price is always right? Why the disorder? Why the disequilibrium? Capital suffers from its own ghosts, the gaps of its economic theory, as well as the ghost of ecology. With capitalism's constant need for more materials, labor, and energy to feed production, it cannot help but exploit nature, workers, and ecosystems to the point of destruction. Yet capital suppresses this ghost, this contradiction. Growth can always continue. There are always more resources to exploit. The costs are of no concern. The lost ecosystems, the extinct species, the polluted rivers and oceans, they're all externalities. In a way, it's like how humans have long imagined themselves as distinct and separate from nature, from the myriad symbiotic connections of critters that make up the web of life. Rene Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." He defined humans by their ability to think and defined them against a presumably unthinking nature. Descartes also said, "I am not this body." To him, humans are merely minds or ghosts in a machine, not really belonging in the body, nor in the world, not feeling at home in it. A specter is haunting the world, the specter of extinction. Every species will either evolve into something else or go extinct, including humans. Extinction repeats as an ever-present possibility, an ever-present inevitability. Throughout the Earth's 4.5 billion year history, there have been 5 mass extinction events. The sun will die out in 7 to 8 billion years' time, so we're statistically set for maybe 6, 7, or 8 more mass extinction events. Extinction will inevitably repeat on this planet we call home. The certainty of this, of our finitude and transience, haunts us. Haunting implies repetition. Several languages have words for ghosts that mean coming back or the one who comes back, like the French revenant or the Norwegian gjenferd and gjenganger. But where do ghosts come back to? Linguistics provide a hint here as well. The word haunt stems from the Old Norse heimta, which means to bring home. A German word for haunting is Heimsuchten, which literally translates to home-seeking. Ghosts seek a home. But in doing so, it intrudes, disturbs, it haunts, over and over and over. Like trauma. Trauma tries to protect you from danger. It tries to keep you feeling homely, if you will. But instead, past events intrude on the present over and over, to such an extent that it also intrudes on the future because you fear the return of the trauma. And so you don't feel at home. That's what's haunting, the repetition, the return. Repetition is the essence of capitalism. Money, commodity, money prime. Invest, sell, reinvest, repeat. This is all that capitalism does. It repeats the cycle of accumulation with the profits of the past. But to do this, capitalism needs to expand into whatever is itself. It can never settle down, it's always on the move, it has no home. The consequences of this, of ever-expanding capital accumulation and industry, of ever-increasing burning of fossil fuels, of ever-increasing exploitation of workers and nature, the consequences will reverberate and repeat for tens of thousands of years. Even today, past emissions are felt in every natural disaster, which are getting more and more frequent. Every flood, every storm, every drought, every heat wave bear the mark of past accumulation and exploitation. The ghost haunts us and will continue to haunt us. In the process, it breaks down the flimsy barrier between the human and natural world. There are no natural disasters anymore. For millennia to come, excess carbon, plastic, forever chemicals, radiation, chicken bones, underwater cities will all be traces of these times. What happens today and happened yesterday will haunt everyone coming after us. And those of us young enough to witness the breakdown and calamity to come. The changes humanity has wrought upon the world are so immense that it will leave a mark in the geological record. We are in a new epoch. The Holocene is over. The Anthropocene has just begun. Many dispute that name, however. Humanity is a ghostly abstraction that obscures many salient points. Who is the Anthropos of the Anthropocene? Perhaps following Kathryn Yusoff, it's better to call it a billion black Anthropocenes, because it's the exploitation of colored bodies exploited as bodies devoid of mind and agency, almost like the Cartesian res extensa, that made this new geological epoch possible. The term Plantationocene evokes similar ideas. Or perhaps the Capitalocene is a better name, since ultimately this is a crisis of capitalism's making. Or perhaps the Spectrocene is more apt, since we've been driven by ghosts all this time. A specter is haunting the world. The specter of extinction. Not only is another mass extinction event likely, we are already in one, the 6th mass extinction. And this one is happening fast. Species are dying out over 1,000 times faster than usual, and it could accelerate to 10,000 times as fast. It's happening so quickly that it's noticeable in the span of a human lifetime. We are haunted by absences. In some places, birds don't sing anymore. In other places, bugs don't cover the car's windscreen anymore. Worldwide, wildlife populations have declined by almost 70% on average since 1970. There's no guarantee humans will be spared. Humans depend on the web of life despite their imagined separation from it. The death of nature will be death to humans as well. We live in traumatic times, times that will haunt us, times that already haunt us. The time is out of joint. Natural disasters are getting so extreme and so frequent that their temporal names, such as 500-year floods, don't make sense anymore. Because how can you have a 500-year flood 3 years in a row? This is the future we are facing, a future that is coming faster than expected, faster than the scientists anticipated. Yet in culture at large, it seems as if time has stopped, or perhaps looped in on itself. Sequels, reboots, remakes, revivals, adaptations, and homages inundate popular media like it's stuck in the past. And it goes beyond mere nostalgia. It's like the future can't be imagined anymore, because even visions of the future are usually rehashes of some kind. It's like the future has been cancelled. Not only are we haunted by the past and the future, we are also haunted by futures the past expected. We are haunted by what Mark Fisher called lost futures. The future as imagined in the past that never came to be. We were promised progress. Every generation would have a better and safer life than their parents' generation. Now, looking ahead to a warming world, that idea seems quaint and naive. Future generations will have it worse than those that came before, at least in the way we usually measure those things. Many lose hope when they look to the future. They feel like the future has been stolen from them. And they're not wrong. Capitalism, while ostensibly future-oriented, all about future profits, isn't capable of long-term thinking. It's all about quarter returns. The 6th mass extinction, tipping points, lost futures, those are quarter 4 problems. Mark Fisher connected the slow cancellation of the future to his concept of capitalist realism, the prevalent sense that a better system is impossible, that there is no alternative. Marxism is dead, socialism is dead, communism is dead. This is the end of history. The age of revolution is over. Nothing can fundamentally change. So what to do then, except look to the past and repeat it endlessly? But when nothing can change, how do you deal with something like the eco-crisis? How do you deal with the collapse of the nature upon which the whole system depends? Antonio Gramsci wrote something almost a century ago that I find fitting today. The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. A specter is haunting the world, the specter of extinction. Every day, 200 species go extinct. Every day, unique ways of experiencing and living in the world are lost forever. Every day, 200 worlds end. And it will get worse over time as the eco-crisis rages on. 1 million species are threatened with extinction this century. To make sense of this, even scientists are resorting to spectral terms. The researchers note that the modern ocean is full of ecological ghosts, species that are now so rare that they no longer fill the ecological roles they did previously when they were more abundant. The ecological ghosts of oceans past already swim in emptied seas. It's a traumatic recognition to take in. Many grieve, eco-grief they call it. They mourn the horrific losses occurring every day, the collateral damage of this system. Grief and mourning are sensible ways to react to this, but eco-grief carries the risk of either being permanent or of burning us out. When animals go extinct every day, when the extinction event is an ongoing one with no end in sight, eco-grief is just as much a mourning for the future as for the present or past. We grieve what we have lost, we grieve what we are losing, and we grieve what we will lose. Eco-grief may never end. It may haunt us. It may become part of our being. Mark Fisher said, "Haunting can be construed as a failed mourning. It is about refusing to give up the ghost, or, and this can sometimes amount to the same thing, the refusal of the ghost to give up on us." Ecological mourning fails. Of course it does. A mourning period usually ends, but how can it end when what we're mourning itself hasn't ended? Can we even start properly mourning when the death is ongoing? We mourn a loved one's death, and an individual death is something that's possible to come to terms with, to accept, to move on from. But when the whole natural world is dying, our empathetic capacities were never meant to deal with that. The natural world is dying, but it's not a natural death. This isn't something to come to terms with, to accept, to move on from. So many refuse to accept it. Many are moved from grief to action. The time is out of joint, and they want to set it right. Haunted by a specter, one from the past, present, and future, the specter of extinction, they act before it's too late. Or even because it's too late. There's another haunting thought. Are we already fucked? Is the end of the world already here? Have we already gone past crucial tipping points? Who knows? But even if the world is ending, it has ended before. And it is possible to resist and rebuild after the fact. The world has ended before for indigenous peoples, for peoples of color, for colonized peoples, for imperialized peoples. Whole cultures, languages, and ways of life have ended before through genocide. Even so, even against such loss, such intergenerational trauma, it's possible to save all that we can save, to preserve and persevere. It's possible to rebuild, and it's possible to fight against structures of oppression, even against great odds. Tackling this complex crisis of extinction, climate change, and exploitation is an impossibly big task. But exactly that is at the core of being, of living, according to Simon Critchley's theory of ethics. Being an ethical subject is to relate oneself to a notion of the good, and part of this is to recognize and accept an impossibly big demand. That's why Critchley's book is called Infinitely Demanding. But the demand isn't accepted by a simple choice. It's something you feel compelled to accept by recognizing it as a demand, by recognizing it as good. It's like a ghost that refuses to let go, and by accepting the demand, you will not let go of it either. Many feel compelled to act because of their children or other young relatives. They feel compelled to act for the sake of future generations. They recognize a demand from them. Future generations can only exist as a specter. Even so, some speak on their behalf. The eyes of all future generations are upon you, and if you choose to fail us, we will never forgive you. The specter will never let you go. The term hauntology stems from Derrida's book Specters of Marx, which talks extensively about one of the most famous specters in history, the specter of communism. Communism is a specter in at least two senses. In 1848, when the Communist Manifesto was published, it was a specter from the future meant to create material changes in the then present by mobilizing the working class and stoke fear among the capitalists. Derrida said that communism acted like a promise of justice from the future. But today, post-USSR, communism also acts as a lost future, a future that was meant to be but didn't come to pass. The death of communism was something the ruling class insisted on. There is no alternative. They insisted so hard on it in the 90s that it came off as neurotic. Why get so worked up about something dead? Why insist that it's dead? Because even though communism died, capitalism is as crisis-prone as ever. Capitalism is as dependent on the exploitation of labor and nature as ever. And as long as capitalist crises and exploitation exist, dreams of something better can and will flourish. Why insist the spectre is dead? Because specters don't die. They haunt. We may have forgotten how to imagine the future, but it's a skill we can relearn. And doing so is an urgent task for the sake of building a better home for ourselves and for all the world's critters. A specter is haunting the world, the specter of extinction. There are many reasons behind the current extinction event. Invasive species, diseases, pollution of various kinds, climate change. But the biggest reason is land use change. Forests cleared, wetlands drained out, rivers dammed up. In short, animals losing their home for the sake of profits. Humans too are losing their home because of this destruction, losing the only planet we know of that can support life. But many humans haven't felt at home here for a long time. Perhaps that's why the planet is in such a bad shape. Humans, having mentally disconnected themselves from their bodies and from nature, they haunt this place, seeking home but struggling to find it. We've forgotten that we're unavoidably entangled with other life, that we are symbionts in a myriad of relationships with critters everywhere, part of the symbiotic real. This disconnection between the human and the non-human is a trauma, one that philosopher Timothy Morton calls the severing. But the time to overcome this trauma has come, because the illusion of humans being separate from everything else is getting harder to uphold. When you consider all the microorganisms within yourself, all the bacteria, viruses, fungi, even your cells, something strange happens. You stop being wholly you. You are teeming with other life. Life that is not you, but still part of you. You consist of things that aren't yourself, and you can't rid yourself of them and still be yourself. You are both you and not you. You are spectral. The same is the case for all things ecological. According to Morton, to encounter an ecological entity is to be haunted. Everything has that liminal, abject, spectral quality to it, of being both what it is and what it is not. Everything consists of things that aren't themselves. Nothing is sealed tightly shut from everything else. The borders between entities and their worlds are porous. We share worlds. Everything is a set of parts, the sum of which are greater than the whole. Ecological awareness is awareness of the spectral. The more we think ecological beings, a human, a tree, an ecosystem, a cloud, the more we find ourselves obliged to think them not as alive or dead, but as spectral. The more we think them, the more we discover that such beings are not solidly real nor completely unreal. In this sense, too, ecological beings are spectral. Since the difference between life and non-life is neither thin nor rigid, we discover that biology and evolution theory are actually telling us that we coexist with and as ghosts, specters, zombies, undead beings, and other ambiguous entities in a thick, fuzzy middle region excluded from traditional Western logic. Being attuned to how you are filled with the non-human, and to how everything has that uncanny quality of being itself and not itself, that is a source of solidarity with the non-human. Solidarity is the noise that the symbiotic real makes, a way to relate, to connect, perhaps a way to recognize an ethical demand, or a way to stay with the trouble, in the words of Donna Haraway. And maybe, just maybe, it can help us imagine the future again. Solidarity restarts temporality. Solidarity means being freed from once being caught in the past and to have entered a vibrant nowness in which the future opens. Solidarity is obviously crucial between workers, but it's also crucial between workers and all life threatened with extinction. Because we are ghosts, we are everywhere, we are doomed to haunt. But haunting isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a state of being, and possibly a way to make history. But there are better and worse ways to haunt. There are better and worse ways to attempt to feel at home. The task of the 21st century is to bring about a world we can all feel properly at home in, or as much at home in as our hauntological nature allows. We need to first and foremost put out the fire in the house and then rebuild the house. Or to use the Greek word oikos, where we get the eco in both ecology and economy. We need a new economy that supports a thriving ecology, so that everything can haunt in peace.
There's no denying you feel blue, you feel sad. You miss the dearest little pad you ever had, 'cause there's come a time. Now don't forget it, there's come a time when you regret it. Someday when you grow lonely, your heart will break like mine. You won't be alone.